welcome back to another Unlocked tutorial. Today we're going to be taking a look at a way to help you get your sounds to stand out in the mix a little bit, gain a little bit of presence, make them fat, help them slice through the other sounds, whatever you want to call it. There's a lot of different techniques you can use, from layering to different routing techniques, to different processing techniques. But this is actually something that you can use in a pinch when you really don't need much more than just a little boost in presence. Add a little bit of sizzle to a sound. And it has to do with distortion. So we're going to look at just a few different types of sounds. This isn't just something for drums or just for vocals or just synths. It can work on a huge range of sounds. There are certain sounds that it may not work too well on, certain sounds that require a different type of distortion. So we're going to cover all of that and hopefully get through it pretty darn quickly. We've put together just this tiny little loop here, and we're going to share exactly what distortion can and can't do for you in regards to bringing these sounds out in a mix a bit more. So let's take a look at this ride cymbal first, just on its own here. Okay, and what we're going to do is just in line, in a traditional serial fashion, we're just going to add a little bit of distortion. Now this is the basic distortion plugin from Logic Pro X. It's just right here in the drop-down menu, preloaded here. And as you can see, we have the tone cranked up quite a bit, and the drive is really not much. We haven't added much at all. So again, we're going to listen to it on its own, and then we're going to add distortion to it so you can hear for yourself the difference. All right, now with distortion, let's crank this tone up just a little bit, take this down just a touch, and without. Okay, so pretty significant difference. Now let's listen to it in context. Again, we'll listen to the dry signal first and then process with the distortion. Okay, now with the distortion. Okay, so you can see quite readily just how powerful this could be for you. Of course, if you need something more than that, just calling a little bit more attention to it in the mix, you're probably going to have to use a different technique. But this is a great way to make them pop. So let's move on to the hi-hats. These are the hi-hats on their own. Okay, and we have chosen to use Distortion 2. It's just another type of distortion plugin here in Logic. Oops. And we'll go ahead and turn this on so you can hear what it's doing. Okay, so for this one, we're using the nasty setting. There's a few here that you can use, but what we wanted to do is just show what kind of texture you can add with just a simple touch of distortion. So let's listen to this in context, first with the dry signal, and then we'll go back and we'll listen to it again with the process distortion. Okay, and now with distortion. So it's a bit of a bump here. Okay, now you can add a lot more grit to this and make it more of like an effect. It'll stand out a bit more. Here we go. And with the distortion. It just changes the tonal quality a bit. There's a little bit more saturation involved in this, is really all it is. Let's listen to this one more time with just a touch more drive added. Okay, so without it, it's pretty thin. It's kind of a precision sound. With it, it's a little bit wider. It's a little bit grittier. You know, with the rest of the percussion in place, it sounds pretty good. So we're going to go ahead and move on to the snare. And we'll listen to this one on its own. And for this one, for the type of distortion, we've just used overdrive. Pretty big difference. Let's turn that off again to do a little A-B comparison. And with. Okay, now you'll notice where the tone is and where the drive is. It's not that big of a difference. This tone knob can actually make a huge difference in the way that this sounds. without it, and with it. So there's just a lot more impact, and the character carries out a lot more. You can hear those high frequency harmonics and grit kind of come into the surface a bit more. Let's go ahead and move on to the kick. Now this one is actually a synthesized kick drum. This is not a real world recording. Although this is an audio file, it's been bounced down from a synth. In fact, these are all classic 808 sounds, so these are all coming from a synth. But when you start getting into those really low frequencies, something funny starts to happen with synthesized sounds. Let's go ahead and listen for yourself. We'll just go ahead and play this through. This is the unprocessed sound that you'll hear first. Okay, now we're going to add distortion to it. Okay, so you hear that huge tonal difference, and it's not because of the tone or the drive settings here. It's because this is a synthesized sound. Had this been a real-world kick drum sample, there really wouldn't be any issue at all, and these same exact settings would give you quite a bit more punch, and really bring the kick more to the surface, and draw a lot more awareness to it. But the reason why we went with the synthesized drum is so you could actually hear this method can warp some sounds. So as you go down in the frequency range with synthesized sounds, you need to be very careful about just how aggressive you are with your application of distortion, if you're not intending it to be used as an effect, but rather a processing tool like we're discussing here today. So we're going to leave that one unprocessed in this mix. And that brings us to another point. If adding just a touch of distortion makes all these sounds so great, why not do it to all your sounds? Well, there's a very good reason why you shouldn't do it to all your sounds. If all of your sounds are being processed this way, none of them are going to stand out in any particular way because of that processing. In fact, it's better to only add this to maybe one or two elements in your whole mix. And that way, you know, the sounds that are being processed are actually getting the attention because of that processing. Okay, let's take a look at what we can do with just a basic synth, with just a touch of distortion. So here it is, the unprocessed signal. And again, we're just going to use the overdrive plugin, very, very basic plugin. Here it is with distortion. So you can hear a little bit of grit comes out. Yeah, it just sounds kind of like a signal that's been processed with some sort of saturation. But there isn't clipping involved in here. It's just a slight augmentation to the frequency signal itself, so the sound wave itself. Okay, so a pretty big difference. Now we're just going to play this loop through and toggle on and off distortion on a few of these sounds, just so you can get a better idea of how these things might pop in a mix when just one or two things is being affected by distortion instead of all of them. So let's turn on the distortion on the ride first. Almost makes it more of a crash cymbal, almost, actually. So let's go ahead, go through this again, hear the hats on and off. Let's leave those on. Let's move on to the snare. That's actually a pretty nice combination there, just with the hi-hat and the snare, and that's it. And I don't necessarily like the added volume boost, just the gain addition on its own with the synth in relation to those other two sounds being processed with the distortion, but I do like the gritty character that is added. So I've just turned down the overall volume on that channel and kept the distortion in place. So there is no volume gain, but there is most definitely a gain in character and a bit of texture. So again, this is a great way to quickly get sounds to come up to the surface where you don't have to spend any time on layering or complex routing or processing or anything. Do this a couple times, and it should only take you a matter of about 5 to 10 seconds to transform one of your sounds this way. So it really is a powerful little trick to have in your back pocket. So we hope it helped. We hope that it helps bring some of your sounds out more in the mix. Thank you for tuning in, and we will see you again soon. Cheers.